Rex is a gorilla. Your folks are both gorillas. You are a gorilla.
They propose revisions that always seem to involve less respect for the rights of free nations and less freedom for the individual. These matters would be difficult under any circumstances. They are further complicated by a trend in Western countries away from global engagement and democratic confidence. Parts of Europe have developed an identity crisis. We have seen insolvency, economic stagnation, youth unemployment, anger about immigration, resurgent ethno-nationalism, and deep questions about the meaning and durability of the European Union. America is not immune from these trends. In recent decades, public confidence in our institutions has declined. Our governing class has often been paralyzed. The American dream of upward mobility seems out of reach for some who feel left behind in a changing economy. Bigotry seems emboldened. Politics seems more vulnerable to conspiracy theories and outright fabrication.
You both were members of Skull and Bones, a secret society at Yale. What does that tell us?
Not much, because it's a secret.
Is there a secret handshake? Is there a secret code?
I wish there were something secret I could manifest.
322, a secret number?
There are all kinds of secrets.
Now, as you may know, my running mate, Tim, is Catholic and went to Jesuit schools. And one of the things he and I have talked about is this idea from the Jesuits of the Magis, the more, the better.
Hello, everybody. This is Brett. Today is another session of Code Word Babylon with Jörg Listman here in Belgium. It is Sunday, March 18, 2018. And we are in the chapter Order Out of Chaos. The Jesuits, their rise, fall, and audacious return. Jörg, how you doing there, brother?
Oh, quite well, thank you. Thank you. I returned from my dinner, from a potato vegetable soup my mother made today, and I've been looking forward to do another reading, and wonderful that you can share the time today on the same day to do two readings. And let's, without any further ado, let's just go to the business and speak of Code Word Babylon, because this book really is very, very interesting in itself, even without all our chitter-chatter next to it.
That's right.
Even though I won't miss that chitter-chatter because I love it also.
Me too. All right.
One thing
we
leading
can't
to
say
another.
that for our listeners, though. I did get that comment the other week. Just read the book. All right. Gotta have a good laugh.
Yeah, of course. It's one thing to subscribe to a YouTube channel that promises you to upload readings of a book like Code Word Babylon, very interesting, and then go to see the new videos coming out.
Yeah.
And watching a video of an hour long, and sometimes sometimes you just get 30 minutes of reading and 30 minutes of commenting and talking about other stuff like now.
Yeah.
But in my personal opinion, we are no robots just reading a book, because if you want to have that, you can order an audiobook. We have to share.
I'm sorry,
our
I have to laugh because the name of this fella's Robo. Well, we love you anyway, you know? We love our listeners. Sure. We wouldn't do it if it wasn't for them, you know? It's just that we're all coming from different places, yeah, and we all come together in Christ. That's the point, yeah. That's right.
But, you know, I understand that when some people are then anxious and want to see how the book continues, but I think that we never spoke about something profane during these broadcasts, so all the other things I think we talk about are also interesting in the light of the book, even though they sometimes don't really deal with the book, but the circumstances, other circumstances, biblical circumstances, and those things are important to me also. So anyway, without any further ado now, I want to retreat to the last paragraph on page 248, where the author tells us that the bull, Dominus Ac Redemptor Noster, that was abolishing or suppressing the Society
Okay,
of Jesus.
sounds good. See you then.
We read in a
Okay.
footnote here that this bull was signed on the 8th of June, but bears the date 21st of July. Clement XIV chose to use a brief as it is a decree of less binding force and easier of revocation, because a bull you can't revocate, indicating his reluctance to suppress the order. I don't think that he was reluctant to suppress the order because he was under pressure of Lorenzo Ricci. But anyway, even without me commenting on that, sometimes you read in official papers that it was a papal bull, and sometimes you read that it was a brief. I think that's both. This discussion is next to the point that counts. We have to see what was the goal of the Jesuit order to be achieved by that paper, whether it was a bull or a brief, doesn't matter. And what they wanted to achieve and what they achieved with it, with this, in Tapasorsi's Rules of Evil, they call it blown cover as cover. And I think that is the right expression for this, giving the people of the world the idea the Jesuit order is banished, is completely forbidden, and doesn't exist anymore. And then from the underground, they are coming back just as a sneaky snake, And that's what they planned, and that's what they did. And that's what this book is for, to tell us about that, especially not only the book in itself, but also the comments that I and Brett make in this regard. So whether it was a papal bull or it was a papal brief, I couldn't care less. The point is, it did what it was supposed to do, and that's more important. So the author continues here on the last paragraph on page 248. The bull, Dominus ac Redemptor Noster, recited with good justification long and heinous catalogue of charges against the Jesuits. Amongst other things, it charged them with instigating various insurrections and rebellions, plottings, undermining corporations of every sort in Europe, Asia, and in America, and labeled them the quote-unquote bane of all nations. It further accused them of, quote, tumults, disturbances, violence, and disturbing the peace of the Church and the nations. The Pope, enumerating their faults, said that these faults were so great as to outweigh their services, unquote. In other words, the Jesuits did more harm than they did good. Yeah, of course they did more harm than they did good, because they are a military order listening to the orders of Satan himself. That does not come any good out of them anyway. Even the things that appear good only appear good, but aren't good. In consequence, the author continues, the Jesuits were utterly dispossessed of every office, service, and administration, and also had their houses, schools, hospitals, estates confiscated. The bull Dominus ac Redemptor Noster withdrew all their statutes, usages, decrees, customs, and ordinances, and pronounced, quote, all the power of the general, provincial, visitors, and every other head of the same order, whether spiritual or secular, to be forever annulled and suppressed, unquote. No matter in what province, state, or kingdom they might be found. The bull concluded with these memorable words, quote, for the sake of peace, and because the society can no longer attain the aims for which it was founded, and on secret grounds which we enclose in our heart, we suppress the said society. The present ordinance shall remain in full force and operating from henceforth and forever, nor shall its meaning be ever be rescinded, glossed, or explained away, unquote. It ended, quote, in the interests of peace and religion, unquote. The fall of the Society of Jesus could hardly have been more sensational. The Jesuits were unceremoniously suppressed. Or, so it seemed at least. The secret grounds alluded to by Pope Clement XIV are still to be disclosed. But perhaps there's a hint from the Pope when he said, "Sometimes we must cut down the mast to save the ship." For the sake of peace, and no doubt the General Lorenzo Ricci knew that in some circumstances to retreat is better than defeat. Could it be that Pope Clement XIV and General Ricci realized that the tide of opinion in Europe was against them? And so to save the ship, meaning the Roman Catholic Church, the general was made to sacrifice some of his best soldiers and even his Pope for ad majorem Dei gloriam, the greater glory of God, of course. And once the ship had arrived safely to harbor and the storm had blown over, the mast was rebuilt and the ship was sent ahoy. As the Catholic Encyclopedia admits, Pope Clement XIV, Ganganelli with his secular name, showed an appearance of a hostile attitude towards the Jesuits. Intrigue upon intrigue. You know, something the author doesn't mention here, but which really opens your eyes when you get the understanding, is what Tapasausi wrote on this part in Rulers of Evil. He mentioned, we have the suppression of the Jesuits in 1773. In 1772, a French monk with the name Abiot published a book called The Art of War by Sun Tzu, with the admission of the general of the Society of Jesus, who was Lorenzo Ricci at that time. So, why am I saying that? Well, you can get the book Sun Tzu's Art of War. You can get that book and read it for yourself, or you can read it in Rulers of Evil, the excerpts that he puts in there. And then you understand the strategy. And the Jesuits are no short of the strategy of Sun Tzu. By the way, in my humble opinion, that book that Amiot wrote was written for and by the general of the Society of Jesus, even himself. And there was never a Sun Tzu, but those are Jesuitical tactics guised in a Chinese story, as they put it in that book. That's what happened, if you ask me. But don't ask me. Do your own research in this regard and see what conclusion you come to when you have all the facts lined up as a string of pearls. Nevertheless, the author continues, under the terms of the Clemens suppression, the Jesuit general Lorenzo Ricci was made a prisoner, as demanded by the Bourbon rulers of France and their other European allies. It was they who forced Clement XIV to agree to the suppression of the Jesuits. But these rulers soon had cause to regret their daring to meddle with the Society of Jesus. Even the Jesuit propagandist, Reverend James McCaffrey from the Society of Jesus himself, all but admits that it was the Jesuits who fomented the volatile and unruly elements which later erupted into the revolutions that swept away the monarchies of France and those nations that had called for the suppression. In a few years, wrote McCaffrey, the revolution was in full swing. The thrones of France, Spain, Portugal, and Naples were overturned, and those members of the royal families who escaped the scaffold or the dungeon were themselves driven to seek refuge in foreign lands, as the Jesuits had been driven in the days of Clement XIV. Antichrist Pope Clement XIV, as we shall see, did not fare much better, not long after Clement fell fatally ill. The record states that at the time of the brief, or bull, and this is the author putting between brackets himself, the Pope was in the most robust health, and his vigorous constitution and temperate habits promised a long life. But no sooner had he signed the decree against the Jesuits did rumors begin to be whispered in Italy that the pontiff would soon die, to be ushered into the realm of the saints by a precisely measured close of something akin to hemlock. The rumors and fears soon proved true. Not too long after, it is alleged, he was served with the dreaded aketa, which poison does not once prove fatal, but according to the administered dose, it may be cruelly predicted how long it would take before its victim dies. In April of the following year, the Pope began to decline in health without any apparent cause. His illness increased. No medicine was of any avail. Clement, who up to then had enjoyed the most robust health, showed symptoms of a strange and unknown disease that completely baffled the court physicians. Up to this time, even the Jesuit Giorgio, that's a name then. Up to this time, even the Jesuit Giorgiel tells us that the Pope's strong constitution seemed to promise a long career. Valéry Piri gives more details. Quote, he gradually lost his voice, while his tongue and throat became so inflamed that he was driven to keep his mouth perpetually agasp in an attempt to obtain, through the freshness of the air, some relief from his sufferings. The pontiff, who had been strong and untiring, became as weak as an infant. His limbs betrayed him, and he could scarcely drag himself from chair to couch. Alternately, he would be a prey to insomnia or fall into a stupor from which he could not be roused. Unquote. The Pope, realizing his doomed condition, cried out on his deathbed, "Alas! I knew they would poison me, but I did not expect to die in so slow and cruel a manner." The Pope suffered in his illness. He lingered. His agony lasted months. Several days before his death, writes Galeazzo Caraccioli and others, quote, his bones were exfoliated and withered like a tree which, attacked at its roots, withers away and throws off its bark. Unquote. In the end, Clement XIV would survive his attempted destruction of the Jesuits by just 14 months. After lingering in agony for several months, he died on September 22nd, 1774. One source gives the date as September 28th. The scientific men who were called in to embalm his body found the features livid, the lips black, the abdomen inflated, the limbs emaciated and covered with violet spots. The size of the head was diminished, and all the muscles were shrunk up, and the spine was decomposed. They filled the body with perfumed and aromatic substances, but nothing could dispel the mephitic coluvia. Rumors abounded that Clement XIV had been poisoned by the Jesuits. Well, we know that the Jesuits are masters of poison, and I don't know where I read that anymore, but there was a writing on the wall, Seda Secante September Vivita, something like that. SSV, I think the initials were. And the meaning of that is, in September, the papal seat will be empty. And this writing appeared months before the death of Clement XIV. So, of course it was all planned, because he died in September 22nd or September 28th. And this, I don't remember the last word anymore, but this September sedis vacantis. And that means that in September, the papal chair will be empty. And that was written on the walls in Rome.
In Latin?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Right. I don't know where I read that anymore. It's possible that it was Rulers of Evil. I don't know.
Yeah.
Have to look that up. When I read a book, I don't have a photographic memory. I don't keep everything in my head. But
no, neither do I. No.
I know that this was in regard with the death of Clement XIV. Anyway, let's continue here. It will be lawful for an ecclesiastic on or one of the religious order, e.g. the Jesuits, to kill a calumniator who threatens to spread atrocious accusations against himself or his religion. This is the quote given, and it is a rule given by Jesuit Francis Amicus. Antichrist Pope Clement XIV was in their eyes such a calumniator. Indeed, as we have read, the Jesuit oath states, quote, I will secretly use the poisoned cup, the strangulation cord, the steel of the poniard, or the leaden bullet, regardless of the honor, rank, dignity, or authority of the person or persons. Unquote. That would include popicide instead of genocide, meaning killing a pope. Several historians have opined that the poison given to Pope Clement XIV was administered by one of his regular guests or a servant, and it is a fact that every week the Pope met with his Jesuit confessor. Even to this day, of those who have access to the Pope, the Jesuits are always the best positioned. The Jesuits know all the secrets of the popes and have the most intimate access to the Roman pontiffs. Indeed, some of the Pope's closest advisors are Jesuits. Further, it is a requirement that the Pope's confessor must be a Jesuit. Jean Lacouture's work, Jesuits, a multi-biography, confirms that Antichrist Pope Paul VI, who was before Cardinal Montini, had as his confessor a Jesuit priest. And the Jesuit Cardinal Paola Deza, with whom the Pope is said to have had, quote, almost daily meetings, unquote, tells us that the White Pope has private, monthly face-to-face meetings with the Black Pope. This quote is verbatim. Well, when we start about speaking the confessors of popes, let us just mention that Cardinal Beer, the one who led Alberto Rivera into the Vatican archives for the training to subvert Protestant churches in the world, was the confessor of Antichrist Pope Pius XII, Hitler's pope. Nor were these weekly meetings a peculiarity of Paul VI's papacy. The Pope's confessor, an ordinary priest, must be a Jesuit. He must visit the Vatican once a week at a fixed time, and he alone may absolve the Pope of his sins. Oh, Brett, can you take over? I have to laugh for the next half hour.
Yeah,
You
no
know,
doubt.
the Pope who claims to be God on earth, how can he be a sinner?
Yeah, that's
Don't you
right.
guys see the contradiction of this Roman Catholic teaching on the one hand and the fact in the other hand? In fact, it says Cardinal Deza was confessor to two popes, Paul VI and John Paul I, both of whom chose him as a confessor. Then you can say that Pope John Paul I didn't learn from the mistakes of his predecessor, right? Because John Paul I was murdered and by that probably poisoned within 33 days of his pontificate.
Ooh, yeah, that's right.
That was the year of the three popes, 1978. First Paul VI died, then John Paul I took over, ruled for 33 days, and then John Paul II came. The reader may be surprised to learn that there have been several such papal assassinations and attempts at assassinations. Malachi Martin, the between brackets former Jesuit professor and Vatican insider, says that the tensions between Paul VI and the Jesuit general was so high that the pontiff was thinking about dissolving the company a second time. He was not to live to execute any such plans. In 1970, Pope Paul VI was almost stabbed to death by Benjamin Mendoza y Amor Flores. Malachi Martin writes, quote, had it not been for that stiff collar at the speed of Paul's private secretary, Monsignore Macchi, who caught Mendoza's arm and slowed its force, Paul VI would have been killed. As it was, he was wounded slightly on both sides of the neck. Then, On July 14, 1978, for no apparent reason, Paul VI fell into unconsciousness for 4 hours and died soon after of a massive heart attack. It would be remiss of me not to point out that almost every pope who has sought to dissolve the Jesuits has had an untimely and sudden demise. Likewise, Paul VI's successor, Pope John Paul I, inherited a financial scandal involving the Jesuits, the Vatican Bank, and its American director, Bishop Paul Marcinkus. John Paul I decided to act. He went to bed with a copy of his speech about his plans to either terminate or reorganize the Jesuits. He was found dead by his housekeeper the following morning. In an earlier age, so untimely a death might have stirred up suspicions. Time magazine on October 9, 1978 notes, quote, "If this were the time of the Borgias," said a young teacher in Rome, "there'd be talk that John Paul was poisoned." 3 years later, on May 13, 1981, the successor to John Paul I, Pope John Paul II, was struck by 2 bullets from the semi-automatic pistol of hitman Mehmet Ali Akça. 3 weeks prior to the assassination attempt, John Paul II had a meeting with 6 of the most powerful cardinals in the Vatican and was in deadlock talks with the Jesuit general. The topic? The forced resignation of the Jesuit general Pedro Arrupe. John Paul had written a letter to Father General Arrupe, insisting on appointing the 80-year-old Cardinal Paolo Deza as his personal delegate to the Jesuits, with power to govern the Society of Jesus. After the failed attempt on his life, John Paul II withdrew his demands and lived a long life, unlike Pope Clement XIV. Not long thereafter, the attempted assassination of John Paul II by Mehmet Ali, May 1981, the Jesuit General Pedro Arrupe made this marvelous admission, quote, "The company is feared everywhere. The people say the Jesuits are wily and so powerful," unquote. Returning to the suppression. For all its comprehensive and bold declarations, Pope Clement's decree of 1773 proved only partially successful and palpably short-lived. After Clement's suspicious and untimely death, Cardinal Braschi was elected Pope Pius VI on February 15, 1775. The successor to the unfortunate Clement XIV was no less in fear of the Jesuits. A former pupil of the Society of Jesus, he knew their wrath. Almost immediately he sought to secure the release of Father Ricci, the Jesuit general, and his assistants from the prison in Castel Sant'Angelo. But Charles III, King of Spain, insisted on their detention. I'm sorry. I can't help it. I have to mention Rulers of Evil again. When I said this Sede Vacante Vaticano, the SSV, the shortage, that was in Rulers of Evil. And Cardinal Braschi, he was the penning master, if you can say. Do you understand that word, penning master? The money master of the Vatican before he became Pope. And it was a time of a little bit more than 3 months, I think 131 days, until his election. And Braschi had constant contact with Ricci through the tunnel from Castel Sant'Angelo into the Vatican. And they were conspiring together to put Braschi on the papal seat. So Ricci was as powerful as always, suppression of the Jesuit order or not. But this is a fact that this author misses to tell you, and if you want to learn on that, please return to you can download it for free on the internet, Rulers of Evil by F. Tapasausi, and you can read on that. Very, very interesting story.
Okay, there's a footnote here too, Jörg, on Pedro Arrupi,
Yeah, the 28th
1907.
Superior General, yeah?
Yes, yes. Did you read that one?
No?
It
For nearly
says,
20 years, he was the central figure in the renewal of the society after Vatican Council II from the Basque country of Spain. He put his medical training on hold to join the Jesuits. He was expelled from Spain in 1932, along with all the Jesuits, by the Spanish government. Yeah, and they did pay back to Spain right after that with the rise of fascist dictator Franco. Huh?
oh, geez, yeah.
So that didn't last. That didn't last very long. And
Things going on.
the successor from Pedro Arrupa in 1991
Mm.
was Peter Hans Kolvenbach,
Yes, that's right.
the one who preceded Adolfo Nicolas, who is now preceded by Arturo Sosa, the
Yes.
current general of the Society of Jesus, which makes him the, 31st?
Oh, I think so. Yeah, I think that's right.
32nd.
something.
31st, Pedro, 28, Arrupe, 28, Kolvenbach, 29, 30,
Yeah.
Adolfo Nicolas,
Adolfo Nicolas.
and so 31 is Arturo Sosa,
Yeah.
the Venezuelan guy who is now ruling the Society of Jesus. But anyway, this little story that I just told you is something that you don't read here, but you read that in Rulers of Evil. And that, again, is, to me, a very blatant point how interesting and important it is to read more than one book.
Mhm.
And to get information from this and to get information from that. And then when you have read these different books, you can combine this combination, or you can combine this information. You can combine this information to get a clearer picture of the whole picture. Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
So, moreover, the Jesuits were never suppressed in Russia or Germany. Well, not Germany, in Prussia, to be more precise.
Mhm.
But in Russia, they got refuge, and in Prussia, they got refuge at that time.
Mm.
Pius VI, seeing the fate of his predecessors, colluded with Frederick II of Prussia to saving the Jesuits. On March 12, 1783, Pius VI approved the maintenance of the Jesuits in Russia. The other monarch to defy the suppression bull of Pope Clement XIV was Catherine II, Queen of White Russia, between 1762 and 1796, who offered the same protection to the Jesuits with equal words of contempt for the Pope's bull. In 1777, the Empress Catherine approved the establishment of a Jesuit novitiate in Polotsk, which is today in Poland. Next part of this chapter, Order Out of Chaos, is called Suppression Fails. The General Reassaults Power. In the end, the suppression with which Pope Clement XIV sought to smite the Jesuits lasted only 41 years. In 1800, Pope Pius VI was succeeded by Cardinal Chiaramonti, who took the name of Pius VII. His papacy was by this time a name only, Napoleon having already annexed all that remaining of the Papal States in 1809, including the city of Rome, and announcing that the Pope no longer had any form of temporal authority. But this was another internal Catholic feud. Now, Napoleon announcing that the Pope had no longer any form of temporal authority confirms what I said in the last broadcast and this broadcast, that this blown cover as cover is just helping the Jesuits to go undercover, out of the spotlights, and that it was not really a suppression, and even more interesting, that I stated before that the people in the world got the feeling the papacy had gotten its deathly blow, as it was said in Revelation 13, right? And by that they are they are thinking they are in safety now. They are secure. The Pope has no temporal power anymore. The Jesuits are forbidden. So what do we have to fear? Yeah, a question that will be answered after 1814, of course. And another interesting point that you have to consider is, of course, that Napoleon, everybody knows that Napoleon crowned himself emperor of the French.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, everybody knows that, right? So that means he didn't accept the power of the Pope to crown him. He crowned himself. But Napoleon came out of Corsica,
Yeah.
the island before the French coast, where abandoned Jesuits had to flee and seek refuge in the time. It is no coincidence that out of that place, Emperor Napoleon rose. Let me assure you that. He was a child of the Jesuits from the get-go. Yeah. On March 7th, 1801, by his decree, Catholic Fidei, Pope Pius VII re-established the Jesuits on Russian soil, from where they were to regroup to launch a counteroffensive on their Protestant enemies in France, the French Revolution. Completely reversing the misfortunes of the Jesuits at the hand of Clement XIV, Pius VII, by another bull, Solicitude Omnium Ecclesiarum, engineered the grand Jesuit return.
Say, Yerk, can I interrupt for a sec?
Sure.
I got a call from my neighbor. Would it be okay to take a break for a little bit and come back?
Yeah, sure.
That'd be great. If I'm sorry to interrupt right now, but I think right now might be okay. Take a little break and we'll just get right back into this because maybe we can start at the top of
we can just start at the suppression fails. That little paragraph we start
this
again.
Is getting really interesting. I just don't want to. I don't want to run off to help my neighbor here and not interrupt you to tell you that that's what I'm doing. So I don't know what I'm going to run into over there.
That's okay. I'm going to cut the audio here as soon as it's done and
cool.
Send it to you, and then I'm going to pick up where we left off before you're
perfect
telling me.
And I'll just get you. I'll mail you right back as soon as I get it back in the door here. But I would imagine it would take no more than 15 minutes.
Okay.
So.
Good.
Yeah, we're just moving a television set. That's all. Yeah. Yeah, my neighbor, he's so attached to his television set. And it just died on him this morning, and he wanted some help. And I helped his brother move it in there. A thing weighs over 100 pounds. It's a monster.
Okay, just go.
Okay, cool. Be right back.
See you then. Yeah.
Thanks, here. Yeah, bye. Okay, what's going on now? Wow. Now? Same thing. There we go.
Oh.
Maybe?
I heard you.
Good. All right. There we are, Yerk. Okay.
Yeah, there we are.
Very well.
Okay, let's just cut this from here. Did you save the audio I sent you?
Yeah, I got it. Yep. Sure do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. I cut that down, so that is how you can use it. It's from your intro to the place when I started reading on March 7th, 1801, and then you asked for an interruption.
Perfect.
So
yes, that's right. Okay.
That's perfectly cut. So I only hope that my SoundPad editor will not forsake me, because it says that this trial version is run out, and I wanted to paste the thing, and I didn't see where I could do that. I couldn't do that on a
don't worry, I can do that easy in the software I got. No problem.
What do you mean?
With editing? Yeah. editing the audio?
The point is, no, I need to do that myself. I do a lot of audios. I need to edit my own audios, Brett.
Yeah, right.
That's not the problem. The point is, I have the program. I paid for the program.
Oh.
I just need them to show me a site where I can go and where they say, do you already have a code? And I can put in my code and then normalize this program. No, the point is, the audio that I send you, my voice is really, really low.
I see.
Can you push that up? Because if I push it up, it also pushes up your voice.
I know. No. I have software here that does that. So no. You don't even need to worry. But still, it's good to have yours just as a backup. So.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, it's cut to exactly what you need, huh?
Yeah. Yep. It's always good to have that, and then I have that for my record, and then if I run into any issues with what I'm doing here with leveling those out, then I have that as a backup. So no, I think that it should work just fine the way we're doing it. And you know what I could do actually is take the recording I have and the recording you have, and I can actually meld the two and make the best out of both. So, I mean, there's a lot of options I have with both our recordings. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, the point is, I start reading now on this last paragraph on page 255 because that's where I left off.
Yep, that's right.
So we don't need an introduction. We don't need to cut anything. And later I can take this recording, put it at the end of this other one, and then send you the complete recording. Then you only have to adjust my voice level.
Oh, cool. Perfect. All right,
that's what I'm saying.
Got it.
Okay?
Yes.
Okay, let's see. 3 minutes and 20 seconds in. Let's start at 3 minutes 30. That's easy to remember.
Okay.
On March 7th, 1801, by his decree Catholic Fidei, Pope Pius VII re-established the Jesuits on Russian soil, from where they were to regroup to launch a counteroffensive on their Protestant quote-unquote enemies in France, that we know under the name of the French Revolution. That was payback, completely reversing the misfortunes of the Jesuits at the hand of Clement XIV. Pope Pius VII, by another bull, Solicitude Omnium Ecclesiarum, engineered the grand Jesuit return. On August 7th, 1814, the Pope left the Quirinal Palace with much pomp for the short procession to number 45, Piazza del Gesù, the seat of the Jesuit general in Rome. There he read the bull which, after 41 years, restored the Society of Jesus to all its former rights and privileges. And by the way, who is not aware of that, when the Pope left the Quirinal Palace, Quirinal is one of the 7 hills of Rome.
Wow.
And yet another twist to this story. We are told that on the occasion just mentioned, Pius VII, frightened out of his wits, gave the following apology for the brief or bull of Clement XIV by delivering the most servile piece of flattery to a Jesuit general in his palace, the Gesù. Quote, "We would believe ourselves guilty before God of great error, in that we neglected the help granted us by God's special providence. We therefore decree to take into our trusteeship our immediate obedience all the members of this order, the Jesuits." Unquote. Thus, did the infallible Pope go bowing to the Jesuit general with such marks of respect and honor, expressing his gratitude in so servile and insipid a manner toward these ruthless persecutors and confessed assassins? This prompted Helena Blavatsky to write mockingly the infallible Pope Clement XIV, Cardinal Ganganelli, as Vicar of God, suppressed the Jesuits on July 23, 1773, with his brief Dominus ac Redemptor Noster, And yet they came to life again when another equally infallible Pope Pius VII re-established them on August 7th, 1814. And so it was that Antichrist Pope Pius VII reopened at high tide the sluice gates with the French, Spanish, and Portuguese rulers tried to shut, which the French, Spanish, and Portuguese rulers tried to close shut. The Jesuit Brotherhood was back, openly, and, quote, once more stalked abroad in their black Berettas, unquote. The Pope was to henceforth be, quote, an inert tool, unquote, in their hands, a poor, weak instrument at the command of the general of the Jesuits. As the Latin expression goes, nunc hoc aliquid, what a thing, that the order, which had sworn undying and unswearing obedience to the Pope, should now make all the popes their footstool in the enslavement of the popedom. Well, yeah, it's a shame that P.D. Stewart is not aware of the papal bull of 1543, Injunctum Nobis, what I told you about a few broadcasts ago. There it is mentioned that the Jesuit general of the Society of Jesus has power over the white pope already. For as Alexander Robertson wrote, quote, the general of the Jesuits, the black pope, is the real and only pope. The one who bears the title is but a figurehead. It is the Jesuits' policy he pursues, their voice that speaks through him, their hand that guides him. When illustrating this fact to me, Count Campello, who was a great friend to the late Pope Pio IX, Pius IX, drew a circle and said, quote, within that circle he, the Pope, is free. If he crosses it, he is a dead man, unquote. The Jesuits fully restored and all-powerful. However, the restoration of the Jesuits was not yet complete. The successor to Antichrist Pius VII, Cardinal de la Genga, which is Pope Leo XII, declared on January 6, 1829, that the Society of Jesus would be canonically restored in England. Thus, Leo XII reinstated the Jesuits to the highest pinnacle of their treacherous and fearful glory. The last stronghold in Europe was now once again their home. Protestant England. 1829. Do you think that is a coincidence that we are speaking of the same year that in England the Emancipation Act was installed, giving equal rights back to the Roman Catholic Church? And that from 1830 on, we speak of the Oxford movement. And if I'm not mistaken, in one of the footnotes a few pages ago, I think we read about somebody who wrote a book that was called Some Secrets of the Oxford Movement. I would like to get my hand on that book, I can tell you.
Oh, The Secret History of the Oxford Movement?
Yeah.
Yeah, I got that book right here.
Really?
I do, really.
Oh,
yeah.
Wonderful. I guess that is quite interesting.
I picked that up right away because I remember, when Tom Fress did the reading of
Roman Civil Liberty.
Yeah, Roman Civil Liberty. I thought, man, this would be a really good book because I think he even mentioned, James Aiken Wiley mentions that book. That's
possible, yeah.
I think that might be the case. Might be wrong, but I forget where that came up, but I thought that would be a great book. So I sent a copy to Tom Fress too. So he's got a copy too. So yeah, maybe I should send that over next time.
Well, I don't know if you are going to send me one. No problem with that book. That would be interesting. Yeah.
Cool.
Because we read here that was in 1829. That is the year of the Emancipation Act in England.
Mm-hmm.
And in that year, Antichrist Leo XII reinstated the Jesuits to the highest pinnacle of their treacherous and fearful glory. The last stronghold in Europe was now, once again, their home. the last Protestant stronghold, let's say,
Yeah.
that fell at that time. That was the United Kingdom. That was
Good
England.
point. Yeah.
The
Very
19th
pinnacle.
century, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
the 19th century, without doubt, ended on a high for the Society of Jesus. As always, in the end, the Jesuits carried the day. As Professor Sarpi quipped, even when a Jesuit plays the losing game, he always rises from the table a winner. That century saw the dry bones come together, and the great secret society rose from the dead, like the phoenix, to take its seat at the right hand of, quote unquote, His Holiness in the, quote, kingdom of the Pope on earth, unquote, the Universal Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm.
Blavatsky commented on this resurrection, quote, the order of the Jesuits is now all-powerful in Rome. They have been reinstalled in the Congregation of Extraordinary Ecclesiastical Affairs, in the Department of the Secretary of State, and in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The pontifical government was for years previous to Victor Emmanuel's occupation of Rome entirely in their hands, unquote. The Jesuits restored again to all their ancient power and wealth, honor and dignities to form the tightest of union with the Pope as his most efficient and trusted lieutenants, with Tadeusz Borzodowski as the helm as their new general. They would henceforth employ even greater subtlety to promulgate their sophistries and to spread abroad their poisonous maxims. And so it was that, notwithstanding the Pope's decree declaring the Society of Jesus to be, quote unquote, forever annulled and suppressed, and despite what appeared to be a most fatal blow, the Jesuits revived yet again, more deadly than before, like a virus that you cannot quite get rid of, or, as Edmund Burke said of them, quote, an infectious plague requiring the precautions of the most severe quarantine, unquote. Yes, I say quarantine. But of course the Jesuits would not admit to any of these facts. For the role of the Jesuit scholars is to blur the historical record, with the intent of dumbing down or erasing from our conscious memory the atrocities of the papacy and of their diabolical order. And so they have doggedly sought to rewrite historical facts in a manner that gives a more handsome and innocuous face to the fascist, barbarous, and ultramontane actions of the papacy and their order. This is the raison d'être, the reason of being, of the Jesuit historians. That is all they stand for. That is their main reason for being, and perhaps nothing more. I remind you again of that desperate letter from the Privy Council of Great Britain, writing to their superior, Lord Falkland, the Lord Deputy of Ireland. They lamented, quote, the Jesuits be not only a subtle society, but also an audacious sort of people, fearing no punishment, no, not the halter itself. So that we are at a nonplus how to banish or to devise a means to chase away these wasps from His Majesty's dominion, unquote. Reader, this is no bigotry, dodged or childishness. Indeed, it was the third Jesuit general, Francis Borgia, who once said of his men, quote, we came in like lambs and will rule like wolves. We shall be expelled like dogs and return like eagles. Dr. Giustiniani, an ex-priest who lived in Rome, hardly overstated the case against the Jesuits when he said, quote, if we consult history and experience, we find that that another so infamous a class of men never lived. Unquote. This, I assure my reader, is no exaggeration on his part. History shows that if you offer a Jesuit a ride, sooner or later he will throw you out of your own wagon.
Oh, that's harsh.
No, the problem is that that's true.
Yeah, I know. It is. It's really true.
So it's not that harsh. It is true. And many people just, when they close their eyes and they say, when I don't see you, you are not there. That's their politics when they deal with things like this, Brett.
Yeah, you're right. That's politics in a nutshell, Yerk. You got it. Yeah. It's, when you're not paying attention, the politics really transform themselves into, political means for a Jesuitical end, I guess we could say, in the one regard. But when you have Protestantism, then you shouldn't meddle with politics, period, I think.
No.
If you really think about the Bible, we're not supposed to be unequally yoked with unbelievers.
About politics, Brett, I have to tell you something.
Please.
There's a German former Prime Minister of Bavaria, Hans Seehofer. I think it was Seehofer, his name, who made a comment a few days ago. Just let me look this up here on my
really?
on my Firefox. Yeah, he made a comment.
Go right ahead.
About where is this here? I have to find that on my Firefox. And what did he say? He said that Islam does not belong to Germany. The German president from a few years ago, the German president from a few years ago said that Islam belongs to Germany. Chancellor Merkel confirmed that. And yeah, it is Horst Seehofer, and he is from the CSU, that is the Catholic. They call themselves Christian, from the Christian Socialist Union. That is the same party that Merkel is a part of in all of Germany. In Bavaria, it has that party does not exist. There it is the CSU, and of that Seehofer was the president, and he has now gotten a new post in the new government in Germany. He is now Minister of the Interior and things like that. And he said all of a sudden that he says the Islam does not belong to Germany. So the former German president says the Islam belongs to Germany. Merkel confirms that, and now Seehofer, who is in the new government, says no, the Islam does not belong to Germany. So there's, of course, now a feud going on in Germany about that political stance.
Oh, yeah.
And I plan to make a video on that, using even the video from Memra TV, which is a German guy who is from Arabic roots, Islamic roots, and who is a converted Christian, who has a wonderful channel and teaches a lot of biblical truth. And he did a video, which I watched today, about a little bit more than half an hour on the topic. And I thought I'm going to use even that video, and then I'm going to make a video on that, and then I'm going to see, well, does Islam belong to Germany? And about an hour ago, about the time when we started this broadcast, the Holy Spirit said to me, it would be wrong for me to engage in politics. I should absolutely do a video on that, but I should approach that from another point of view. So I will not take any stance, neither of Merkel whether the Islam belongs to Germany or not, or neither of Seehofer whether the Islam does not belong to
Right.
Germany or not.
Right.
I will make a video from a biblical point of view, because this is what this Memra guy even didn't do.
Wow.
He of course said, well, Germany is a Christian nation. No, Germany is not a Christian nation. And then he took the Grundgesetz, which is the quote-unquote constitution of Germany, and read about how we have habeas corpus. I mean, the right of a body that cannot be harmed, of an unharmed body. That's habeas corpus, right? Because that's paragraph 2 in our constitution, what is called the constitution, the Grundgesetz. And he was speaking about that, and I thought, why is he speaking about all this political stuff? And now I got the idea, because you were speaking about, what were you just saying about politics when I started my rant here?
Well, it's really interesting, Jörg. Earlier today, or actually last night, I was looking at the comments on your Islam video.
Yeah.
And I made a comment. I'm sure you read it. I
read it.
Yeah, I'm sure you did. But, I never get any responses when, I get a comment from you. It doesn't flag on my channel. So I have to go and search it out to see if you left a comment. So, of course, I went back this morning to check to see if you left a comment. So then maybe I would counter back. But no problem. But I was thinking about this fella that was asking you on that video about, engaging in a conversation about, these quote unquote Christians. Yeah. And you sent me an email on that too. And I've been thinking about that. And it's like, you can't really engage with anything political, because the moment you do, you take sides and you're in.
That's right.
And the devil's got you. Yeah.
That's why I decided, thanks to leading the Holy Spirit, me to that idea, to do a video about that stuff, but to not go into the political debate, but to go into a Christian debate and say even, why would even someone like Memra TV, who calls himself a quote-unquote Christian channel, even deal with this politics? Didn't he understand anything that Jesus taught?
Or he's just not paying attention, Jörg.
So I'm probably going to make a video
unaware,
out of that.
Caught unaware, I believe. And that's how it works, Jörg, I guess. That's how it works. But
but I guess I just won't do that today, because I'm quite exhausted after our last reading, and we should bring this broadcast to an end.
Yes, we should bring it to a close. Wonderful. All right.
It was a very very interesting chapter, the one that we just read.
It is.
That was called Order Out of Chaos.
Mm-hmm.
The Jesuits, their rise, their fall, and their audacious return. And I hope that our viewers and listeners of the video are being edified by every comment that I gave on this, and that they trace that for themselves, and that they trace the quotes that I made for themselves, like reading the book of Tapasorsi, like getting the book from Sun Tzu, The Art of War, making up their mind about MJ when he published Sun Tzu's Art of War just 1 year before the quote-unquote suppression of the Jesuit order, get their own understanding of Revelation 13, that maybe that wound that is afflicted there can have several meanings, and by that not taking anything away of the reign of the Antichrist, of course, of the 1260 days, absolutely not, but just applying that also in another way, and that maybe that also could be fitting for the Jesuit order. I mean, in my opinion, it is, but I just want to ask our viewers and listeners to do their own research and come to their own conclusions, because that's the conclusion that I came to with all of my research, and I don't see any unbiblical consequence out of what I said here. No, I think I'm absolutely in line with the Bible teaching here. I do not do a personal interpretation. I just say this could be. I'm not dogmatic about this. I don't teach that. I just say that when you have this understanding, that you could understand Revelation 13 also in that way. There are prophecies who could be interpreted either this or either that way. I have the same little trouble with Daniel chapter 8, verse 14, and I'm going to get to the ground of that in the future. But I'm just not out of this right now. And Revelation 13 is another one. You can absolutely understand it as the Pope losing his temporal or spiritual power. Well, he never lost his spiritual power, but losing his temporal power, whether in 1798 through General Berthier, sent by Napoleon, or in 1866, the time that I always promote, because that is from the time of Emperor Phocas and Boniface III. 1866, when the protecting French troops left the Vatican and left the Pope defenseless, and there he lost his temporal power, which then resulted in the spiritual forming of Vatican I, the Vatican Council, where the Pope was even declared infallible, something they could only do because he did not have temporal power at that moment. But anyway, not going back into that subject right now, just asking our viewers and listeners to this video or audio or whatever they're going to do with it, to edify themselves and to study these things for themselves. And I will repeat what I ended with the last broadcast. Next to the Bible, which should always be the first book of your studies, get the book Romanism and the Reformation from Henry Gretton Guinness. And first of all, get the Bible, understand the Bible, and read daily in it. Become a good Berean, as it is said in Acts chapter 17, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
And with this, I'm going to shut up and leave Brett for the closing remarks of this broadcast on Code Word Babylon. I'm very much looking forward when we come again to the table to do another reading of this book, which will start then with chapter 25, Ruling Through the Bavarian Illuminati. And you know me, I just love Bavaria. As a hamburger, I have been raised with really being a Bavarian bigot, so I'm going to look forward to reading that. Until next time,
all right,
God bless you.
Yes, thank you very much for the reading, and always looking forward to the next session, Jörg, and hoping that our listeners will be edified also, and we'll catch you all next time.
That for the first time in human history, for the first time in all of human history, almost all of mankind is politically awake. And these new and old major powers face still yet another novel reality, in some respects unprecedented. And it is that while the lethality of their power is greater than ever, their capacity to impose control over the politically awakened masses of the world is at a historical low. I once put it rather pungently, and I was flattered that the British Foreign Secretary repeated this, as follows. Namely, in earlier times, it was easier to control 1 million people, literally, it was easier to control 1 million people than physically to kill 1 million people. Today, it is infinitely easier to kill 1 million people than to control 1 million people. It is easier to kill than to control.
We're at the very beginning stages of a very brutal and bloody conflict. And I believe that we've come horribly off track in the years since the fall of the Soviet Union. And we're starting now in the 21st century, which I believe strongly is a crisis both of our church, a crisis of our faith, a crisis of the West, and a crisis of capitalism.
His son Jesus is here in our midst. His bride, the church, is honored to host an event affirming the dignity of the human person and the sacredness of all human life.
I think Russia is no longer a communist state, first of all. That's very important to realize. It hasn't yet defined itself, however, effectively as a democracy. It is still uncertain.
We're at the very beginning stages of a very brutal and bloody conflict, of which if the people in this room and the people in the church do not bind together and really form what I feel is an aspect of the church militant, if the people in this room and the people in the church do not bind together and really form what I feel is an aspect of the church militant, to really be able to not just stand with our beliefs, but to fight for our beliefs against this new barbarity that's starting, that we will literally eradicate everything that we've been bequeathed over the last 2,025 years.
You didn't mention the president by name, but it was hard not to conclude that that's who you were referring to. Is that fair?
I was certainly referring to the threats that we are now facing with this stated goals of this administration, which would upset the last 70 years of a new world order which was established after World War II. 70 years based on human rights, respect for the law, free trade, all of the things, aspects of this world order that took place after one of the most horrific, terrible wars in history, and I'm for maintaining it.
We are grateful to be citizens of one nation under God, who acclaim this evening that in God we trust. Bless our two candidates, our benefactors, and those whom the L. Smith Foundation has been honored to serve for 7 decades. Guide us safely home, both this evening and for all eternity, through Christ our Lord. Amen.
It's no coincidence